Hello there, Royals of East Longmeadow. It's so wonderful to see you all today. Thank you so much for joining me for a story and some songs. We're going to have so much fun together, but be sure not to lose any glass slippers. This story is called My Perfect Wedding, and it's about when I got married to my prince. My dreams were coming true at last. With the help of my mouse friends, I had managed to race down the stairs just in time to try on the glass slipper the Grand Duke had brought. It proved that I was the girl the prince had met and fallen in love with at the royal ball. Now, my prince and I were going to be married, and our brand new life together would soon begin. But first, there was a wedding to plan, and I didn't have the faintest idea of where to begin. Prudence, who ran the castle household for the king, was happy to take charge. He sat with me and read off a long list of things that needed to be done for the wedding. "Excuse me," I said when Prudence paused for a moment, "but couldn't the prince and I just have a simple wedding?" Prudence frowned. "Cinderella, now that you are going to be a princess, you need to start thinking like one. This should be the grandest wedding the kingdom has ever seen." Later on, the royal dressmaker arrived with several wedding gowns. The first gown I tried on was covered with bows and sashes and had a huge skirt. "The guests will mistake me for a present," I cried. "You look just like a princess," Prudence said. But I thought the dress was too fussy. "Do you think you could design something plainer?" I asked. "Plain and princess do not go together," Prudence said. The next day, Prudence and I visited the royal florist. He presented them with a bouquet of roses, which was so big it looked more like a bush. "Do you have something a bit smaller?" I asked. "It's perfect," Prudence said. "You just have to know how to carry it." I grabbed the flowers and a bee flew out. Buzz, buzz. Prudence screamed and the bee stung her. Then I screamed even louder. That afternoon, the mice found me all by myself in the garden. "Where's Bossy Lady?" asked Gus. "Poor Prudence," I replied. "She got quite a nasty bee sting. The royal physician says she has to stay in bed for the rest of the day." "But what about the wedding plans?" Jacques asked. "I'll just have to take care of them myself," I declared. "Look at the size of this list. What do you think I should do first?" "Who's a-comin', Cinderella?" wondered Jacques. "Oh, the guest list. Good idea, Jacques. Let's see. Well, of course, all of you are invited," I replied, "and my fairy godmother, too. I wish she were here right now." Almost as fast as I made my wish, the fairy godmother appeared. Who better to make my dreams come true than my fairy godmother, of course? The fairy godmother wasn't listening, though. She had already moved on to the next item. "Invitations," she declared. In the blink of an eye, thousands of lovely cards sat in stacks around the room. "Now we shall prepare the feast and make the cake," the fairy godmother announced. I changed back into my blue dress and followed my fairy godmother to the royal kitchen. Meanwhile, 3 of the mice lifted some scissors and cut a small piece of fabric from underneath my wedding gown. Then they threaded needles, pulled out a box of tiny pearls, and began to make a veil. The rest of the mice took a stack of cards to deliver. They didn't get very far because their plans were spoiled by Pom-Pom, the castle cat. "Ooh, close call," Jacques cried as he and Gus raced to the kitchen, where I was with my fairy godmother. Isn't she a silly cat? I'm sure some of you have cats at home, but maybe not mice. "And now for the best part," the fairy godmother exclaimed. With one grand sweep of her wand, she created the biggest, fanciest cake I had ever seen. What do you think? The fairy godmother asked. Prudence will love it, I said, trying to hide my disappointment. And speaking of Prudence, I really should go see how she's feeling. Poor child, the fairy godmother said after I had left. I think all these wedding plans are too much for her. Jacques and Gus tugged at the fairy godmother's sleeve. Cinderella likes smaller things, Jacques told her. Gus pointed proudly to himself, like mice. All at once the fairy godmother understood why I hadn't been thrilled. My fairy godmother went to my room a little later. I'm afraid I may have gotten a bit carried away, my dear, she confessed. Now tell me, what would the wedding of your dreams be like? After listening to me, my fairy godmother began to perform her magic. With the wave of her wand, the veil was finished. Then the invitations were sent to a smaller group of people. Now, let's cut that cake down to size, my fairy godmother said, with a twinkle in her eye. As we walked to the kitchen, I turned to the mice. Thank you, my little friends, I said gratefully. Anything for you, Cinderella, Jacques said. Bibbidi-bobbidi-boo, my fairy godmother cried as she pointed at the cake. It shrank and shrank until it was the size of a normal wedding cake. The next day, I got ready for my wedding. I wore a simple white gown, veil, and gloves. I carried a bouquet of garden roses that the mice had gathered for me. It was just as I had dreamed. But as the king was about to escort me down the aisle, I looked down and gave a little cry of surprise. I wasn't wearing any shoes. Whatever would I do? I looked at the mice and then down at my feet again. My fairy godmother followed my gaze. Good heavens, child, she exclaimed. You can't get married in your bare feet. She waved her wand and suddenly I was wearing glass slippers. After the ceremony, there was a joyful party. It wasn't the kingdom's grandest celebration, but it was the most special. Even Prudence was pleased. How did you ever manage all of this? My prince asked. I smiled and said, with friends by your side, anything is possible. And my prince and I have lived happily ever after, ever since. This is a story about when I almost lost a very precious gift from my prince. It's called The Missing Ring. It had been exactly 1 year since the prince and I had gotten married. To celebrate, Prince Charming decided to hold a splendid anniversary ball, and that was not all. That very morning, he presented me with a gold ring. It was set with an enormous, brilliant blue sapphire, my favorite stone. The ring was truly lovely, and I treasured it more than any other jewel in my royal collection. For the rest of the day, I could think of nothing else but the prince I loved so much, and the delightful time we would have that evening. That afternoon, I realized I had lost the ring. It was a little too large, and it must have slipped off my finger. Oh no, I cried when I noticed it was gone. My ring, where is it? I checked the floor and all around me, but it was nowhere to be seen. Don't worry, Cinderella, my mice friends Jacques and Gus piped up. We'll help you. All we have to do, Jacques declared quite calmly, is think, where have you been today? Then we'll go to look at all these places. Yes, of course, I said. That's a wonderful idea. Now, let's see. I thought for a moment. The first thing I did after the prince gave me the sapphire ring was go back to my room to write in my diary about it. And so, right away, we hurried to my bedroom. Do you see it anywhere? I called to Jacques and Gus. No ring, Jacques said with a sigh. No ring here either, agreed Gus. Wherever was my ring? Well, Let's try the kitchen then, I said brightly. That's the room I went to next when I wanted to make a pot of tea. But the only ring in the kitchen was a day-old sugared donut. A little stale, said Gus, his mouth full, but so tasty. Donuts are one of Gus's favorite foods. Jacques too, but mice do eat anything, don't they? Next, we hurried on to the music room, where I had gone to practice a new song. Jacques and Gus searched the piano inside and out. Gus even played a song, hopping on the keys as he looked. But if the ring was there, they could not find it. How silly was it of them to play a song on the keys. Perhaps, I said, we should try the library. I read there for at least an hour this afternoon. To the library, exclaimed Jacques. Let's go. Although we searched way up high and way down low, the ring was nowhere to be found. I began to get nervous. It was nearly time to get dressed for the anniversary ball. Still, I had not quite yet lost hope. You know, I said, I also went out to the stables today. Perhaps I lost my ring somewhere in the stall. We raced to the stables and searched the stall, sifting through piles and piles of straw. Gus even searched the feed trough, but they still had no bright sapphire ring to show for it. I scratched my head. There's only one more place that I can think of to look, I said. The garden, where I went to go pick some flowers for the ball. First, I told the mice, I picked some lilies, then some tulips. The mice went from one flower to another. They searched each and every blossom until Gus exclaimed quite suddenly, Cinderella, I see it. He scurried to the ground and picked up a shiny, round, blue object. Sapphire, Cinderella? Gus asked hopefully. I shook my head. It's just a marble, I replied. I said. I just know my ring is somewhere, but it's late, and I still have to get ready for the ball. I sighed as we walked past the well and toward the palace. Then I stopped and turned around. Wait a minute. I just remembered. It was after I finished the flower arrangement that I noticed my beautiful ring was gone. And that was just after I drew some water to pour into the vase. You don't suppose, I said, wide-eyed, could have fallen down there? I hope not, said Gus, trembling. But Jacques just rolled his eyes. Oh, don't be such a scaredy cat. Get into this bucket. Do you see anything? I called down to the mice several minutes later. I don't know, said Jacques. It's pretty dark in here. All I see is lots and lots of eek! I pulled up the bucket as fast as I could. Thank goodness you're okay, I said. What did you see down there? Oh, nothing, said Gus slyly. Nothing but Cinderella's ring. My heroes, I cried. You found it, and just in time. The mice jumped up and down, clapping their paws happily. It really does come in handy to have small mice friends. That night at the anniversary ball, the guests toasted my prince and I. We poured some sparkling cider and toasted Gus and Jacques, our guests of honor. We knew we were so lucky to not only have one another, but to have such wonderful and devoted friends. This is a song I would sing every day when I woke up, to remind myself that although my stepsisters and my stepmother were very mean to me, it was important to keep believing in my dreams and to stay kind. I hope you'll sing along with me.